Hi there, folks. The ambient music you'll hear in this episode was created by Tabletop Audio. And now I'll let our guests introduce themselves.
Hey, I'm the Bear Bard from Bear Bard Tales. I have a channel here that I go over and narrate different, generally horror stories, but all different types of stories from the YouTube verse. I'm also on Dice Goblins. We play some of the other creators in the space. Dead of the Drake, Critical Kunuk, some of the other guys. We're all getting together to play some D&D and have some fun. Other tabletops as well.
Hi, I'm Fred Wheeler. I run the How to D&D YouTube channel, and I do pretty much anything on Dungeons and Dragons or any kind of role-play game, and that's pretty much me. That's it.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I usually go by Flutes as my pen name, let's say, for my website and my YouTube channel, Flutes Loot, which I do all these things with my wife. We're just a couple of enthusiasts for D&D who started writing and then started doing some YouTube as well. And we just talk about D&D, and sometimes it's about lore, sometimes mechanics, it's just like whatever we feel like.
All right, thank you everybody for joining me here today. So the question I have for you all today is, do you have a favorite house rule that you incorporate into most of your D&D or tabletop games? If not, what is your opinion on house rules and changing the raw or the rules as written?
I have a house rule, which you might not consider a house rule, but basically I decide that the players make the decision or choice as to what happens with a dead character. Whether the character is continued in the game, or whether they roll up a new character and bring that into the game. Frankly, I don't want to take part in that process anymore. I've done it for too many years, causes me too much grief, causes too much grief for players. So I just eliminate any particular interest in that side of it. It's their problem. If they want to bring the character back and they've got the ability to do so with spells, great. If they want to bring the character back and they don't, they just need to talk to me and I'll give them some options with some complications probably, because I like to make things a bit more complicated. And then we're just going to bring the character back in, and we're not going to worry about rolling up a new character. Toss that out the window. So that's how I approach a lot of my games. I also allow for retraining characters outside of game time. They can change anything but the character name, the gear, and their gold. Everything else I couldn't give a toss about. They can just change the lot. This is going back to Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League, yes, as a product of being a league coordinator for many, many years. And I thought, well, let's just keep doing that beyond level 4. I don't use the grappler feat in my game. And I know people sort of got confused about that. And I said, yeah, but now we can't grapple, Fred. And I said, no, now everybody can grapple because they don't have to have the grappler feat. Okay, so you can now grapple. It might take a few more actions, but it's going to happen. But you don't have to have that stupid feat that all you do is grapple with. And then Elven Accuracy. My group, in the end, we decided that it was one of the best feats in the game. And we banned it. It is never coming back, seeing the light of day ever again. I am not going to apologise for that because it is busted as hell. And I guess my approach and belief around house rules is I don't like them. I don't like creating them. I'm not a fan of them. It's just not one of my things. But then again, I also think that Dungeon Masters should make rulings rather than try to fumble through Dungeons and Dragons 5e rule sets.
Very well spoken. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of people ban specific feats in their games because, I mean, I can pick off a few right off the top of my head. Great Weapon Master and, the ranged equivalent of that. I know a lot of people tend to ban those ones just because it's like, yeah, you hit harder, so what? But depends on the table. But I like that. Jordan, Flutes, what have you got?
I tend to like house rules as a DM that a lot of players on Reddit don't like. And one of them that I like the most is lingering injuries. Because I like not killing characters, but I like there being like something that happens. If you got knocked out in a fight and you were down at 0, because people always say like, oh, in 5e you just pop back up and then you're down again and like healing word. Well, what if you just were getting exhausted? And so I usually just say like, oh, you have a lingering injury, your back's out or something, and you get a level of exhaustion when you get knocked out a lot that way, or you have to roll and you might get exhaustion. And that creates more tension, and then it's scarier, even if you survive, that like you're slowly being worn down. I did this in Curse of Strahd, and they were like always fearing for their lives because they'd get someone down to exhaustion 0 and celebrate, and then they'd have some fight where someone ended up with like 3 levels of exhaustion. They were like, no. And so it was like a grittier game. But I've also seen memes of people like, there was one, it was a comic strip where someone was like running a game and they were like, oh, the goblin cuts off your hand. And someone's like, what? And then like the next session, like no one showed up. The DM's just sitting there by himself. And I'm like, is that me? But, because I've definitely like had people like lose their legs and stuff, but it was after they fell like 1,000 feet and stuff. And so I like that. And I also like the idea of tweaking rests if you are not in like a place of shelter that is safe. So it's not like you can just long rest in the middle of a dungeon or something like that. I'm big in favor of that kind of stuff, just to make it a little scarier to go out and not be like in a civilized or safe place. I'm into that kind of stuff. I'm playing a character right now where I'm using Treant Monk's dual wielding rework, and it's been working just fine, just to make dual wielding a little bit better since it's so trash in 5e. And then also doing some things where like we can tell that some races are probably going to be updated in maybe 2024, because like no races have 25 speed anymore. They're all just like, whatever, even if you're small, it's 30. So I'm playing a halfling, and so the DM was like, okay, yeah, we can make you 30 speed. And I was like, thanks, because I like my movement speed. My opinion on house ruling is to do it as little as possible. I have a background in improv, and I've taught so many people improv, and I'll be doing like an improvisational instruction, and I'll say, this is the rule, this is like generally how you do this, and like this will help you get better. And they'll say, well, what about these situations? Wouldn't it be funny to do it this way? And it's like contrary to the rule. And I'm like, I promise if you learn the rule, you don't have to stop and like think of every like contrary example, because you'll just get it. When you master a rule, then you know when you can make an exception. And I think a lot of DMs jump too fast into wanting to change the system before they even understand it. And my biggest advice to people who want to do house rules is to learn the regular rules first as much as possible, so that when you do house rule, you kind of know what you're getting into and you know what to expect, what's gonna like nerf one class or like one character's choices, or like make one spell like super powerful that you didn't even think about, you know? And so my thing is learn the rules, and then then the rules become principles when you've mastered them, and you know when to deviate. And especially with new players, when you teach them, if you don't tell them that you're house ruling or teach them what the real rule is, then they go to another table of like strangers and they're like, oh, I played D&D, I'm pretty good at it. But they try to cast a spell as a bonus action, like we were saying earlier, and then do a fireball. And then everyone's like, what are you doing? And then they like feel bad. And they're like, what's the truth? Did my DM teach me the wrong game? You know, I've heard people say that a lot, of just like, my DM does it this way. Is that wrong? It's like, by the rules, like there's certain ways to do it. Yeah, but you can definitely deviate. I'm all for that. It's everyone's own game. But from like a professional standpoint, I guess, like at least try to learn the rules before you go crazy house ruling or saying that the system sucks or something like that.
That's an excellent point. You know what? For DMs out there, absolutely. Learn the rules. Learn the rules. And if you are going to house rule something, explicitly state that this is not how this works in the rules. So when players leave your table, they're not assuming, like you'd said there, when they go to other games, that this is just how the game works. And if you're new, if your players are new, just go vanilla. Just do it for the sake of cementing that. Those are excellent points. So, Alex, Bearbard, what are your opinions on house rules, and what have you got?
So I think this is where we separate the people that narrate D&D stories from the smart people who teach people how to D&D. I love house rules. I love making the game your own. I truly believe as long as everyone's having fun, there's no wrong way to play the game. Not to sound very like participation trophy-ish, but you know, I personally don't have any like favorite house rules that I run. Like I do little things like crits. You know, crits, I just make crit always be full damage plus whatever you roll. Because nobody wants 2 1s. Nobody wants to roll a 1 on their crit damage. Like that just feels gross. So it'll be, if you're using an axe or whatever, it'll be, the D6 plus 8, so it'll be 8 plus whatever you roll. That's going to be your damage. I like to add in, I have this one, bloody. Once you get to half damage, you become bloody. And with combat, just combat, it doesn't make a difference. But if you try to do something else, it can. If you're disarmed and you try to pick up a weapon, maybe you have disadvantage. If you go and try, if you try to use like environment stuff, and that just counts for the enemy too. If you try to do environment stuff, well, again, you're gushing blood. Things aren't that easy. I don't know if any of you have been stabbed, but when you're stabbed, it's not easy, or you even just cut yourself with a knife or something like that. Like, it's not easy to do things, it's not easy to just like do fine, whatever. So, and then switching weapons takes a whole action in combat and stuff like that. I really like to believe in the rule of cool. So everything's a rule until it stops things from being fun, and then screw it, we change the rule. With combat in particular, I stick to a lot of the actual rules as written kind of thing, unless I qualify ahead of time. Like I put limits on wish. It's just to save myself from headaches, that kind of thing. But I'm definitely very much like, if you can explain to me with what you want to do, how it works, and it makes sense to me and everybody, do it. As long as everyone's having fun. And I tend to be a really like nice, lenient DM. I let my and again, I'm probably a lot newer of a DM than you guys. So that maybe that's part of it too. And then, no Adventures League, so I never had to deal with that kind of headache either. I've only played with people that I know, so I've been very fortunate when it comes to that. And then so we all just kind of agree on, hey, this is all kind of fun stuff. Let's do it, and it works out. I like to add, kind of like you were talking about, when every time you're down, when you go down, I don't make you like lose a foot or something like that. Like I'll break a leg if you try to jump off a building, But scars. I like to add scars, just like that. I don't know if you guys ever played Fable back in the day, where every time you died in that game, you got a scar. I just kind of like always like that, just something to like remind, like, hey, something happened. And then if you're like, a pretty boy bard trying to flirt, just stuff to keep in mind.
Yeah, there are a lot of good things in there, and even some of what you listed, I use in my games too. Like critical damage, I absolutely implement that. I'm surprised. Actually, I would be surprised if not a lot of people didn't incorporate that into their games nowadays, because it's a great rule, and of course, enemies should use it as well. And I'm very much on a similar page as you, Alex, in that I really do love house ruling the crap out of D&D. I've been playing it for so long now. It's like, I know it so well. And kind of like what Flutes is saying, learn the game. Now I'm going to mess with it immensely. And there are some mechanics where I'm like, I wish this had gotten more use out of it. And one of those being exhaustion. So what I've introduced in the games I'm running right now is whenever a player goes down and somebody like heals them with magic, they'll come back up, but they're also gaining a point of exhaustion from being forced to gain those hit points without properly resting. So the only way to come back above 0 without that is either rolling a 20 on your death saves or, resting properly to regain those hit points. Another one I do, and I also think of myself as a kind DM. Another one that I do is when players level up, we roll for the hit point increase, but any result less than the average, you just take the average instead. So you can only have more. And I allow this kind of thing because I also love to throw meaty, tough things at my players. So it's like, yeah, you better be as strong as you can be because I'm going to try and kill you guys. So other house rules that are pretty common, like bonus action, drink a potion. That kind of messes with, the thief subclass of rogues. There are some issues there, but I never have those in my game. So right now it's fine. Yeah, there are certain consequences to certain house rules. whatever works for your table, whatever everyone has fun with. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of nice things to pick from everything everyone here has said. Is there anything anyone wanted to add before we wrap up? Or is there anything you might be inspired to add to your games now that you've heard them?
Oh, I actually like just seeing different people's. I haven't done this yet personally, but I like seeing different people's, like when they add their own like systems to things. And I'm working on one of those right now where I'm starting a campaign and everyone's going to be level 0. And then so basically the first chapter is going to be them gaining skills, and at the end of that they get to choose their class. So I'm putting in like you do this quest, cool, or you do this activity, then you earn these points. So you want to be a warlock, you try to do these types of things to earn these skill points, and then at the end that's where you end up. So I always like seeing stuff like that where people can make up their whole own side system that doesn't affect combat, but it's kind of like what they just did. I guess this is homebrew now, but what they just did with the dating thing in the last book, Strixhaven, where not necessarily with dating, but how they just kind of put in this whole extra social system that you could build up and mess with.
I also had something come to mind, and this is kind of a different kind of house rule. It's a paradigm shift with multi-classing. So a lot of people get hung up with multi-classing because they think, well, what's your you want to take a level of warlock now? Why? Like you're gonna make a deal with him, but you're a paladin. That's fine, but like you could think of multi-classing like really in a world where your characters are playing. You don't think, oh, I'm a bard and you're a cleric and you're a fighter, and that's what I know you are. You just like see what people can do. And so if multi-classing ever like seems weird to anybody, just pretend that was always their class and multi-classing isn't really happening. It's just that was always what they were going to get at level 4 or whatever, and whatever character they're progressing into, that was just always what it was going to be. They didn't have a class, like me today. Like I once thought I was going to be a patent attorney and that would have been my class. Did I multi-class because I went into like business or whatever, and so like it's just always what you were going to be. It's not like, I don't know. So it's not a house rule, but like it's just a paradigm shift that I've seen a lot of people go, like all of a sudden multi-classing doesn't seem so bad if I just think of it as like that's always like taking a level of warlock doesn't mean you have to go make a pact with some being. Maybe that was just the powers that you gain naturally in your progression. You could do it that way, but if anyone ever has a problem with multi-classing, maybe just think of it as that's what you were always going to be. You're a custom class, and it just happens to use multi-classing mechanics to achieve it.
So I like to incorporate it into the story. So like we have one where a rogue just multi-classed into a ranger, and so they did some jobs with this guild that was like druids and rangers and nature, the Emerald Enclave, excuse me. Yeah. And so we just that was just part of the story, was him, kind of someone taking him under his wing there. And so when he multi-classed, he kind of like, showed him some stuff because the guy's from the city. Like, and, so the country boy, kind of showed him how to shoot a bow and do some of that extra stuff. And then, in turn, like he showed the NPC some of his tricks as a rogue. And so it's like a mutually beneficial thing. So I like to take that and roll it into the story. Even if it's a warlock that wants to multi-class into paladin, like you could make it work if you're creative enough. It's just, take a little effort.
I didn't think we were going to dip into multi-classing in this one, but those are both great points. And that paradigm shift, totally new to me, blows my mind. I love it. But before we spiral into this too much further, this is where we're going to wrap up here today. So thank you guys for joining me for this discussion of house rules and such. The Bear Bard, How to D&D, Flutes Loot. Go check out their channels, subscribe, watch their content. These are all wonderful people. We're having a lot of fun talking here today. So until next time, may you all play Dicely. Bye-bye.